Hello everybody and welcome back to ChäoS. I believe I made these changes after recording the last part, so let me know how the audio sounds because I did make some adjustments to my filters, namely regarding the noise gate, adding an actual filter to sort of make adjustments to how the voice sounds and whatnot. Just let me know what you all think about it. I'm curious to know. I mean, I think it sounds okay, but obviously it's kind of important also that I know how you all feel about it. If you all hate it, well, it's better off for me to go back to how it was before. Let's go ahead and get started. Before I had any idea what was happening, the clerk forcibly led me inside. Despite my having spent so long holding off on entering, I didn't have a chance to turn her down. So, in the end, I came in. It was all very well that I'd cleared the most excruciating hurdle, but if this store were under the Demon Girl's control and everything about the D-Sword had been a trap to lure me in, I'd have no right to complain about getting slaughtered on the spot. I swiftly surveyed the store's dim interior. There wasn't a single customer. The air was awfully stagnant and faintly hazy. The unpleasant mixture of the smells of tobacco and mold reached my nose. I'd probably start feeling ill if I stayed here for so much as 5 minutes. Although I spotted items that might have been products, it was difficult to judge whether or not they were really for sale. All of them had been left haphazardly, and there was no way to distinguish them from plain garbage. And for the beginning, not one of them had a price tag. I didn't realize it until I came in, but there was a lot of porno merch. Among them were the sorts of devices you often see in rape/humiliation eroge, and I was at a loss for a safe place to look. Apparently this store was similar to a variety shop aimed at adults. After bringing me into the store, the clerk sat down on a stool beside the counter, zoning out as she smoked and showing no indication of continuing to meddle with me. She must have been one of the sources of the mist in here. Regardless of the fact that it had been less than a minute since I'd first come in, nervousness, embarrassment, and a weird sense of pressure, and my feeling physically sick, made nasty sweat seep out of my forehead. I wanted to leave this otherworldly place as fast as possible. I had to be quick about finding a D-Sword. I walked toward the back as I browsed my way through the store. I soon located the corner for fantasy-related weapons, which had been written about in the blog I'd found. That one corner stood apart from the rest, being the only area with conspicuous colors. Numerous pole-shaped toys had been neatly put up on display. All of the toys were long tubes, or rather, while they might have been different colors, virtually all of them were lightsabers. Moreover, one could tell right away from how badly they were made that they were bootleg merchandise. I was skeptical of whether they would really glow. It would seem that the light shuriken mentioned in the blog had sold out, which was also surprising. Except mixed in with the lightsabers was just one item that obviously differed from the rest. One luck was all it took for me to know it was a D-Sword, because it was more or less the same as the illustration I'd seen online. I tried picking it up. It was unexpectedly light. I wonder what it was made of, though it seemed like soft vinyl. There was no blade, the edge was slippery, and of course it didn't hurt me in the slightest even when I stroked it with my fingers. Compared to the ones held by Senna and Fess, it was poorly designed and lacked a sense of weight, and more than anything else, it didn't give me the sense that it could serve anything with the lightest, that it could sever anything with the lightest of touches. I wondered if perhaps there was a fake. I was worried about it, but there wasn't anything else in the store that you could have called a D-Sword. As you previously mentioned, it looks nothing like the ones that Senna and Fess had. I don't know why you would think that this would be related in any way to the swords they were carrying. Would this even shine in the first place? The D-Sword Fess had swung about at her show had glass parts embedded in its blade, which let off a blue light and looked incredibly badass. but there was no glass to be seen anywhere on the sword I had in hand. Maybe I ought to give up on buying it. This D-sword was so crudely made as to make me reach that conclusion, never mind how long it had taken me to get here. But find your sword. Finding your sword will save you. I recalled Fess's words. Right, if I didn't buy it right here and now, I'd lose my only chance of obtaining a D-sword. Or you know, this is in no way related to the D-sword in question. It looked cheap at the moment, but maybe, once it recognized me as its rightful master, it would manifest a mysterious power. Or maybe I'd seen too many anime and manga. But I had sensed just the sort of unknown power in Fess and Senna's sword, so even this sword must. What to do? While I debated with myself, the clerk came up and stood right behind me before I knew it. Smirking darkly, she pointed at the D-sword and muttered, 10,000 yen and I'll throw in a free bonus. At first, its absurd cheapness made me down my ears. I certainly hadn't thought it would be less expensive than a figure. I had built up a fair amount of savings from RMT, and it only cost 10,000 yen. I could get away with buying it simply by giving up on purchasing one figure. Upon hearing the price and the additional fact that it was the last one they had left, I came to an immediate decision. The free bonus was a cheap-looking bangle. Frankly, I didn't want it. I went through hell after buying it. Town Vanguard didn't do deliveries, and so my only option was to carry it home myself. Toy or not, my excitement instantly cooled when I thought about how I'd have to cross through the heart of Shibuya carrying such a stupidly long sword. But I'd already paid, and the clerk fiercely refused to let me perform a return. This was a pretty intense type of humiliation play, having to haul a huge toy like this down a fashionable street. As expected, the delinquent couples and stylish ladies who passed me went by with mocking smiles. Shit. They should all die. I hunched over single-mindedly and hastened on my way home, internally entertaining fantasies of taking the D-sword I had just bought and slashing about with it in the middle of the road, massacring innocent people, creating a festival of blood. Let's not go crazy here, dude. I'd made it back at last. Partway through, I'd broken into a run and had kept at it ever since, so I was breathing hard by the time I reached my base. The cold looks from the other pedestrians had really stung. I was impressed with Senna for being able to endure this embarrassment. In a certain sense, it made me respect her. I stood no chance of following in her footsteps. Or, you know, it's the fact that nobody else can see the sword, except for her, us, and presumably other people who have one. Presumably. Which does sort of beg the question. Have Fess and Senna ever seen each other with their swords? Or no? An abrupt sound came from my blind spot, a place I couldn't see from here in the shadow of my base. Was someone there? Petrified in place, I gulped down my breath. The ever so innocent smile of the demon girl who'd called herself Rimi popped into my head. Maybe she had come again. Maybe this time she had come to kill me for real. What should I do? Should I run? I sensed a presence. The sunset cast someone's shadow across the ground. No matter how I looked at it, the silhouette was female. I instantly readied my D-sword. When I actually held it up like this, it felt even less dependable than I thought. The Senna's sword had possessed a mysterious formidability, and an overwhelming kind of pressure that refused to let anyone near it. But the D-sword in my hands didn't have anything of the sort. Maybe it really was a fake. Could I fight with something like this? Of course I couldn't. I couldn't do it even if I had the real thing. Plus, I hadn't understood until I tried holding it the way I was now, but it was pretty heavy. Maybe I was gripping it wrong. In any case, it would prove impossible to swing it around properly. The shadow unexpectedly wavered. It was approaching me. I squeezed my eyes shut and haphazardly slashed the sword out in front of me. I myself didn't think I'd be able to defeat my opponent that way. Despite that, I harbored the faint hope that as long as I had this sword, I'd be okay. That I'd somehow do something for me, or that it'd somehow do something for me. But I didn't hit anything. My enemy didn't say anything. Could it be that a single strike from my D-sword had utterly destroyed the demon girl? If so, that'd be beyond amazing.
鬼、その剣何？
When I opened my eyes, the one standing there was Nanami, rather than the demon girl. She was looking at me a tad derisively. All the strength went out of me at once. I flopped right down where I'd been standing.
お前、脅かすなよ。
She was the worst little sister ever. It's in horribly poor taste to enjoy freaking out your brother. Who the hell did she think she was? This was why the third dimension would never hold a candle to the second.
別に脅かしてないよ。いつもみたいにお兄の生存確認しに来てあげたんじゃん。なんでナナが30分もお兄のこと心配しながら待ってなくちゃいけないわけ？ナナの貴重な時間が無駄に消えてっちゃったじゃん。お兄のバカ。
Wasn't the whole point of the phone was so that you don't have to do this? Worrying? She'd been worrying about me? Like I'd be fooled by such an obvious lie?
で、どこ行ってたの？出かけるなんて珍しいじゃん。携帯にかけても繋がんないし。
Okay, well, I suppose that would explain why you came here. I'd left my phone behind at my base. It wasn't like anyone would call me while I was walking around, so no point in holding on to it.
そもそも、その剣何なの？もしかして買ってきたの？
Nanami gazed curiously at the sword.
あ、わかった。アニメのおもちゃかなんかでしょ？ほんと、お兄ってオタクさんだね。
Now, depending on how you play this, you will either sound like a nut job, or like slightly less than a nut job.
しかもこのおもちゃ、ちっとも似合ってないよ。さっきだってへっぴり腰で構えちゃってて、思い出したら笑えてきた。
Ignoring Nanami, I undid the lock on the container house's door and began to go in.
ちょっと無視すんな。
帰れ。
If she'd come to check on my survival, she didn't have anything left to do here. She was constantly making fun of me, and every time she came here, all she did was complain. But if it bothered her that much, she didn't have to come in the first place. It was a hassle for me as well.
あのね、わざわざ様子見に来てあげてんだから、もっとありがたがってよ。せっかくお土産まで持ってきたのに。
Oh, a present. Nanami spoke sulkingly. Sulkily. Pouting.
お土産？
そう、お母さんが持ってけって。ほら。
Nanami handed me clementines. There were about 10 of them, held in red netting. Only 10? That's cheap. I had mixed feelings about this. I'd eat clementines if they were in front of me, but they weren't my favorite food or whatever. Don't go tsundere on food, dude. Just don't.
というわけで、ナナもちょっと一服したいから一緒に食べてあげる。
Clementines and tangerines are great.
帰れ。
もう、妹がお土産持ってきて、しかも一緒に食べてあげるって言ってるんだよ。もっと喜びなよ。
What precisely about eating clementines with Nanami was supposed to make me rejoice? Anyway, it was obvious that she'd simply wanted to eat clementines from the start, because she'd been a glutton since we were little. She used to eat my share too. Who knew how many fights we'd started that way? I would say how many fights started that way instead of we started, but whatever. Paying no attention to the fact that I didn't want her there, Nanami went on into my base. There was nothing to be done for it, so I followed after her.
お茶ある？あったかいのがいいな。
Why would we have tea? As if I would. Basically, I don't drink anything besides Coke. Nanami sat down on the sofa and immediately pulled out a clementine. Sighing, I leaned the sword up against my computer desk. I didn't need the bangle in my pocket, so I lobbed it.
あれ？それ何？
Quickly spotting the bangle, I tossed away at the floor. Nanami picked it up, because of course she did.
へえ、かわいいバン グルじゃん。これも買ってきたの？お兄にしてはいいセンス。
No, it was a bonus for overpaying for a piece of crap sword. Cute, she says. What about it? No matter how I looked at it, it was a piece of kitsch one could buy for the likes of 500 yen. Name was the one with bad taste. Disregarding her, I took one of the clementines and went to sit in front of my PC.
ねえねえ、なんでこれ捨てちゃうの？
I mean, there's only a few reasons somebody would throw something away. One of the big ones, because they don't want it.
だっていらないし。
じゃあさ、これナナにちょうだい。
And of course she would do that.
はあ？
いいじゃん、どうせ捨てるならさ。
But that doesn't mean you get to take it.
たまにはお兄ちゃんらしく妹にプレゼントの一つでもしてよ。
You call it a present, but it's an unneeded item that you started coveting all on your own.
勝手に持ってけば。
本当？やったー。
What an uncontrollable chick. Gotten the go-ahead from me, she put the bangle around her wrist right away. She was a pretty cheap sister to get delighted over such a cheap item.
お兄、どう？似
全然。
合う？あっそう。お兄のバーカ。
It was supposed to have been given... I was supposed to have been giving her a present, wasn't I? So what was with this treatment? Little sisters weren't supposed to call their brothers stupid. What kind of education have you been receiving, huh? Go play 100 arrogate.
バーカ。
She was grinning perkily. I was getting really pissed off
これ
here.
気に入っちゃったからもう返さないもんね。っていうか、お兄からプレゼントもらうなんて初めてのような気がする。しょうがないから大事にしてあげるよ。
Like I care. No one asked you to treasure it. I hadn't gotten it for Nanami's sake to begin with.
もう用は済んだんだから帰れ。僕は暇じゃないんだ。邪魔するな。
At the moment I said it, Nanami pursed her lips.
そんな言い方しなくてもいいじゃん。それにみかんまだ食べてないし、お茶もまだ出してもらってないよ。
おめえに飲ませるお茶はね。
Nanami glared at me fixedly. Her shoulders tensed with anger. At last, her eyes started to well up.
わかったよ。そんなに邪魔なら帰る。
ああ、さっさと頼む。
お兄のバカ。お兄なんてみかんの皮で目つぶし食らって失明しちゃえ。あとバングルは返さないかんね。バカ。
I mean, we didn't want it in the first place. Yelling in a voice that resounded piercingly through the room, Nanami grabbed her bag and bolted out with tremendous energy. That storm-like time had finally come to an end. Hanging out with Nanami always wore me out. Why did she come here every week when it rubbed me the wrong way so much? Become a bit observant, will ya? Oh.
ファーストメルトは期待以上の結果に終わりました。
Now we get to look at the big bad.
GE レートの上昇率は当初の予測からわずかな誤差があった程度です。
バイオリズムコントロールも順調なのかね。
渋谷の GE レートは他のエリアと比べて高い値を持っていると同時に安定性についても特筆したものがあります。
それゆえに意図的に操作しやすいということか。そして渋谷にいる人々のバイオリズムを急激に引き上げることもまた。
実験結果についてはレポートをご参照ください。納得していただける成果を上げております。
貴様が成果を出すのは当然だ。そのために高い金と多くの人材を提供しているのだからな。
実効性については理解しているよ。この数ヶ月だけでも我が会の信者が数倍に膨れ上がっているからね。
それではプロジェクトノアは次の段階へと進ませます。
コードサンプルの件はどうするのだ。すでに3人分は確保したとはいえ、 目標数値には達しておらんではないか。
いかにも。数値達成のためには最低でも5人分はなければ厳しい。
サンプル保持者は集まりつつあります。あとは採取するのみ。
ならばその件は任せる。
信仰の救いあれ。くれぐれも慎重にことを進めるように。
はい、心得ております。
And of course, the church is one of the big bad, or at least involved with the group.
そろそろ寝るか。
Oh, I didn't read that line because it was 5 in the morning when I checked my PC clock, biting back a yawn. Today, too, I'd spent ages hunting an ESO, but no monsters had dropped the rare item I'd been looking for. No success, even after pulling an 8-hour marathon. Well, but this kind of thing happened a lot. I glanced quickly at the side of my desk. There leaned the D-sword I'd bought yesterday. I left it close enough that I could take it up at any time. On a side note, the sword didn't radiate any light whatsoever. I was hoping that, sooner or later, it would metamorphosize into one with as cool a shape as Senna's, but inside my monitor, Grimm's avatar happened to be right in the middle of leveling up. My Nightheart had reached the maximum level, so he wouldn't be going any higher. Rubbing my sleepy eyes, I thought to myself that maybe it was getting to be time for me to create my next character, the third after Lieselot. Experience points, huh? It was a familiar enough concept in RPGs, but I thought experience points also existed in real life. When I first started ESO, even I was a baby who didn't know right from left, but now I could boast of being the strongest in Baselard, with my name of Nightheart der Blitzschnell. It's been so long since I had to read that I completely forgot how I was pronouncing it before. Known all throughout the land. For example, it wasn't unthinkable that the person behind me might, by some chance, happen to lose some of the experience points he'd built up. Then maybe it would be all too natural for me to forget things I'd known. Maybe the fuzziness in my memories could be traced back to the same source. And then there was Shogun and the Demon Girl. Before my experience points got cleared, perhaps it had been perfectly normal for me, the person behind me, to post under the handle of Shogun in chats and to spend time IRL with the Demon Girl, with Rimi. No, that was certainly improbable. But in the past, I might have possessed a power capable of letting me square off with that Demon Girl. Was I the only person who had thoughts like this? Though I also felt like it wasn't a particularly strange or mysterious way of thinking. Because the only thing human beings have to go by are the fundamental standards they've come up with all on their own. Maybe even now I, not just me, but everyone in the whole world, was judging everything wrong while living out my day-to-day life. When I was little and went to the dentist, he told me, "You're a good boy for putting up with so much pain." At the time, it made me think I was kind of amazing for enduring the pain all the way through, and I simply became proud of myself. Thinking back on it now, however, the comment had probably been based on judging the degree of pain by the relative progression of the cavity. But even with the exact same level of pain, there might be people who could bear it and people who couldn't. In other words, I suspected that people might be utterly different in how they recognize and experience such sensations. Take giving birth, for instance. Online, I had often seen people saying that though women are able to hold out through the pain of labor, it would be inherently impossible for men. Which is probably not strictly true. If we're being honest here, as a general rule of thumb, if as part of a biological function, you have to go through something that will produce generally considered unbearable levels of pain, as just a biological reaction to that, you're gonna have inherent changes that make it so that it does become bearable. Changes in chemical balance and shit like that, basically. It's just a general rule of thumb. Obviously, still for some people the pain is going to be unbearable, and others they can get through without too much of an issue, but as a general rule of thumb, if your body has to go through some bodily function that is unbearably painful, it'll, through evolution, basically try to find some way to make it slightly more bearable at the bare minimum. Take marathon runners, for instance. Maybe they excel not because of the power of their bodies, but instead because of their ability to endure pain. Take sadists and masochists, for instance. If there are people who enjoy hurting others, then there are also those who feel the pleasure of others when others hurt them. In short, I figured that the only way people felt things and the strength of their inner nature, their ability to put up with it, varied from person to person, which, yeah, okay. Perhaps the level of pain in the toothaches and headaches I endured from time to time in truth far surpassed the range of pain an ordinary people could take. Okay, no, I read that wrong. An ordinary person could take. God, I don't know how the hell I read that as an ordinary people. And I passed the same level of pain on to someone else in the same manner as a relay runner passes on his baton. The agony of it would make them go into shock and die. The conclusion this led to was the selfish delusion that maybe I was a very special type of human being.
特殊な人間か。っていうか、何を大げさな。
Well, you're claiming that you're the protagonist in a story. I mean, not really, because obviously that's not strictly true either, because some protagonists can't deal with pain. Though I'd rejected that idea, surely everyone had these kinds of delusions. Every man longs to be the strongest in the world. Everyone wants to think they're special, that they've been chosen. They want to think a dramatic, stormy life, like in TV shows and movies, is awaiting them in the future. It was the so-called yearning to be a hero, to put it more crudely, being self-centered. Of course, I too had those kinds of delusions, or those kinds of desires, rather. Indeed, it might be my destiny to defeat the demon girl. But then, if I were told to carry that out in real life, I'd require that a number of conditions be met first. At the least, the one thing I'd really needed was the ability to use cheat codes for stuff like secret attacks or perhaps invincible mode. I didn't want to undergo any pain or fear. If I couldn't do that, if, in other words, I was supposed to do with my own power, I definitely wouldn't. Which was why, if the person behind me accidentally let me my experience points get wiped, it could cause me tremendous damage. That was a very long fade to black. Today I got to school just in time not to be late. I guess it was indeed unreasonable to play online games till morning on a day when I had school. I wouldn't have minded if I hadn't run. When I reached the front of my classroom, I breathed deeply to collect myself. I mustn't do anything to draw my classmates' attention. For me, coming late would be a fatal mistake. My life would implode as soon as some juvie set his eyes on me. I eased my way into the classroom. My face was lowered. I mustn't lock eyes with anyone. Of course, I didn't give them any kind of thoughtless greeting like good morning. I turned myself into air so as to make the others pick up on my existence as little as possible and headed for my seat. I always did things this same way. And today as well, I made it to my seat without encountering any problems and lowered myself into it. I soon plastered myself flat against my desk. At this rate, I'd be safe until homeroom started. But I only relaxed for a breath until someone tapped me lightly on the back.
Yo, Taku. 今週は3回も学校来てんじゃねえか。真面目だな。
Pretty sure it's because we need to make up our attendance because of other times where we didn't attend, even though we were supposed to, according to our attendance chart. Misumi again. Though I was kind of sick of him, I'd feel bad ignoring him, so I started to raise my head, and hesitated. Was this Misumi the real one? The day before yesterday, I'd done as the demon girl told me and called him. At the time, he acted undeniably strange. To begin with, he answered by saying that the demon girl was our classmate, as if this was perfectly normal, even though I knew it wasn't so. Maybe the demon girl had brainwashed the current Misumi. On the contrary, there was also the possibility that she'd switched him with someone else.
おい、どうした？早くも爆睡モードか？
An electric sound rang through the classroom. I sensed a faint vibration near my chest. It was my cell phone. Shit, now of all times. What kind of idiot would call at a time like this? On top of that, even though I was sure I'd set it to vibrate, the ringtone was ringing at the same time. I might have messed up the settings.
鳴ってるぞ、タク。
And we'll let this go a little bit longer. My timer was about to go off. I know that much. Should I hurry up and answer it? But if I did, Misumi would know I'd only been pretending to sleep. Besides, I don't like talking on the phone. Except, if I didn't pick up, it would bother the rest of the class. Judging by how my ringtone was reverberating through the classroom right now, things were pretty damn bad. I wasn't supposed to stand out. This was incredibly bad.
おーい。出ないのか。マジで寝てる？
Shit. While I wavered over what to do, I'd completely lost my chance. I couldn't move. Just then, the sound of vibration died down. It must have switched to voicemail. I let out a relieved breath in such a way as to keep Misumi from catching me at it. I'd been right to learn how to use voicemail.
なあ、タク。相手は誰だ？まさか女か？この前一緒に帰ったあのメガネの子だろ。そうなんだろ？
How the hell are we supposed to know, Misumi? We didn't even answer the damn thing. Damn it, you're so noisy. Please don't do anything more to interfere with me, because that phone call already made me stand out more than I should have. Had Misumi always been this persistent? Though his forwardness remained the same, I felt like he'd been a little more sensitive in the past.
やめなよ。
Ruh-roh. I heard that voice from close by Misumi.
そっとしておいてあげたら、大臣。なんだか疲れてるみたいだし。
Probably because we were up until 5 in the morning. She was in this classroom as though it were natural for her to be here.
どうせゲームのやりすぎだろ。
Apparently, Misumi's been stalking us.
お前、タクに甘すぎるぜ。
だって大臣は女の敵だし、そういう人には優しくしません。
I gotta agree with her there, Misumi. She was chatting away as though it were natural for her to do so. She was blending in as though it were natural for her to belong with us. I was too horrified to raise my head. I didn't want to acknowledge the fact that she was here.
ま、別にお前に優しくしてもらわなくても、俺には優しくしてくれる女はたくさんいるんだよ。
Misumi continues to be a bit of a creep.
だから、そういう発言が良くないんだってば。彼女さんが聞いたら泣くよ。
I kind of get the feeling you should probably have that as a plural instead of possessive. Just literally going by his previous line of dialogue, saying that there's plenty of other girls, plural, to do it. Don't think you're looking at girlfriends in the singular, but rather in the plural.
今の大臣の彼女が誰だかわかんないけど。
Because he probably doesn't have just the one.
ほら、チャイム鳴った。先生来るよ。
I assume there's supposed to be a sound effect for a bell ringing. I honestly could not hear it. Had the demon girl truly been my classmate from the beginning? No, that was impossible. 2 days ago, she hadn't been here. At least the... excuse me. At least the only person who'd come to talk to me that day was Misumi. Yesterday, I hadn't come to school. And today, she was here. How? Had she wormed her way in? Okay, we're gonna go ahead and end it here. This seems like a, I was actually kind of expecting to see her face and I was gonna do a cliffhanger ending there, but nope, never mind. We're not gonna do that. I was only gonna let this go and run for a little bit longer. I just, yeah, kind of figured as soon as we opened her eyes, we would be seeing her, and then I just end it there, but whatever. So that'll be it for this part. A quick reminder that I do have a Patreon and a Discord. I do highly, highly recommend that you join the Discord. It is my go-to place for posting about the channel. So interruptions to recording, streaming, because I'm trying to get back into streaming again now after having completed my move and everything. And sort of been able to get into the groove of recording again. So now I'm tacking in streaming, trying to get back into the groove of that. But yeah, so that'll be it for this part. As for the Patreon, if you find yourself enjoying this series or any of the other series on the channel, anyone help support the channel so that I can have the ability to be able to afford more easily, or at least for the channel to help cover the cost, rather, is probably the better way to phrase it. Buying games and things like that. That is the best way to help support the channel so that I can do that. And obviously that's more than just games. That also includes upgrading hardware periodically because, you know, you got to do it every so often. Although, of course, hardware is one of those things where I just do it anyway, but it's always helpful if the channel can help subsidize some of its own costs. Subsidize some of the things that I would be doing anyway. Never hurts, at least for me, obviously. But yeah, so for as little as $1 a month, you can get early access to all of my videos. When I remember to update my Patreon, I don't actually update all that often because I don't have any patrons, which is probably counterproductive. If I update it more often, people might be more inclined to go and become patrons, but that's one extra website to visit and maintain, which is one of the reasons why I haven't done a particularly great job of updating it. But yeah, so I will see you all next time, but until then, a goodbye and farewell.